Well, hi. I ran across this video, thought I'd share and give you some tidbits of information related to this holistic health video that I ran across. That's basically it. Let's get into it.
What would happen if you give up sugar for 2 weeks?
I know it's been short. I just want a quick note. I can't actually tell if she's speaking here. It seems like there's a voice with an echo laid on top of a video where she's doing something completely different. But I could be wrong. It just seems like it to me. Anyway, regardless. So yeah, what would happen if to your body if you were to cut sugar for 2 weeks?
The first thing you would notice is that your face would change. It would go from being rounded and puffy to a more slender, sleek face. The reason you lose weight when you cut sugar is because your body will switch fuel sources and start to burn fat cells.
No, that's not accurate. Uh So, okay, let's walk through this. If you were to cut sugar, you would be cutting calories, most likely, because you probably wouldn't be replacing that sugar with something else. Even if you, it'd be difficult because if you're cutting sugar, you're probably cutting out like soda, liquid calories, and stuff like that. So, I do agree that if you were to cut sugar for 2 weeks, you would have an outsized impact on your caloric intake, which would then allow you to reduce fat in your face. And that is true that as you get leaner, your face starts to change. So if you gain body fat, it starts to get rounder typically and the softer edges. And if you lose body fat, you start to get more chiseled. So that's true. But she says something about you lose body fat cells. That is incorrect. The what you lose is, and this is a common mistake that people do, is they conflate the molecules of fat with the cells of fat. So adipocytes are the fat cells, and you have billions of them on your body. Regardless of if you're lean or if you are obese, you still have billions of fat cells, adipocytes. Now, those adipocytes, most of them are a subclass of adipocyte called a white fat cell. And these white fat cells contain a large amounts of fat molecules. So those are two very different things. The fat molecule is much smaller than the actual fat cell. Now, when you lose body fat, you are not losing fat cells. You are actually removing fat molecules from the fat cell, which then shrinks that fat cell so that eventually you start to look, leaner in the face, for example. So this is a common misconception here, and it's pretty. I mean, it's probably not something you want to get wrong when you're trying to educate people, but let's just let it go for the time being.
Body fat and sugar are the two primary fuel sources for your body, and
Body fat and sugar are the primary sources of energy. Or yeah, that's okay. So again, I just want to be 100% clear. We're talking about body fat and in terms of the molecules, not the cells. It is true that your body oscillates between sugar use for energy and fat molecule use for energy. So yeah, we'll go with that.
given the opportunity, your body would rather burn sugar instead of fat.
Given the opportunity, you would prefer to use no, no. In fact, it's a really simple way to look at this. You have X number of times by many fold more body fat on your skeleton than you do sugar reserves. So your sugar reserves are in the glucose that's found inside your bloodstream, the sugar that's found, the glucose, those are the same sugar, glucose that's found in your skeletal muscle cells, as well as what's found in other peripheral cells and in the liver. Now, you would burn through all of or a majority of that in about 24 hours, and you could speed that up depending on how active you are. However, your fat tissue, the actual molecules that are found inside your fat cells, that is you could last weeks on that. And it turns out that the majority of your body typically burns a lot more fat than it does sugar, but just because the absolute amounts of each are so different, you burn through your sugar at a faster rate. So, would it be accurate to say that your cells prefer to use sugar if they're given the opportunity? Well, I don't think I would frame it that way. When you feed sugar, when you feed carbohydrates, again, that's the same thing. Carbohydrates, sugar, and glucose are the same thing, although there are some dissimilarities there as well. But for the time being, if you were to consume, let's say, just straight sugar, we don't even have to worry about carbohydrates. You just consume straight sugar. Yes, a lot of your cells will switch to a metabolism that focuses on glucose metabolism, sugar metabolism. But that I still probably wouldn't frame it as your body in general innately wants to be using sugar, because when you're not consuming sugar, guess what your body's doing? Even though it has sugar around, it's burning a minimal amount of sugar, and it's actually burning a lot more fat. So that's where this idea of metabolic flexibility comes in. The cells being able to use blood sugar or sugar in general throughout your body, glucose, and then being able to switch over to fat molecule use. So I would characterize that differently.
When you deprive your body of added sugar, you give it a chance to burn stored fat. Start
That is true. If you are depriving your body of sugar, it is true that you will switch to more fat burning, to be primarily fat burning. So that is accurate, but it is not true that you will necessarily lose body fat from that. Now, to add some nuance to that, the reason why I'm saying that is because you could consume non-sugar, you could consume calories or energy, nutrients from other sources that would then lead your body to still be using more fat metabolism, but you are not losing body fat. The reason for that is because you're replacing the fat molecules as quickly as you're using them. And that's a really simplistic explanation, but that's ultimately what's happening. So, I don't think, again, I would not frame it that way. That said, I realize that some people are gonna say, "Well, I cut out sugar and I lost body fat, so it must be true." That's because there's a confounding variable that's involved in that, which is you cut your calories. Your calories decreased below a certain threshold that your body needs, and therefore it started taking fat molecules out of your fat cells, and therefore you started losing body fat. So that's why the nuances there are really important. But if you're to just talk really plainly, really simply, yes, most likely if you were to cut sugar, that you would then see body fat loss. And it is true that you would be using a lot more of this fat metabolism. It's just not a one-to-one that if you're using fat metabolism, you're necessarily losing body fat, just to be clear.
Starting with your liver, 4 of your organs benefit significantly from cutting sugar. First, your eyes improve as sugar deteriorates the retina, leading to conditions like diabetic retinopathy.
Okay. There's a false equivalency there, that if you're consuming sugar that you will become diabetic. That has been debunked for many, many years, that sugar necessitates that you become diabetic and therefore experience diabetic retinopathy. She's absolutely right that, the overabundance, the long-term overabundance of sugar in the bloodstream, glucose in the bloodstream, which is obviously related to type 2 diabetes, can lead to diabetic retinopathy, which can shut down your vision and strongly affect all kinds of organ systems. So that is accurate. But would a healthy person who's not diabetic have this issue? Most likely not.
Second, your kidneys suffer less inflammation, reducing issues like sugar or protein in your urine and severe cases of diabetic neuropathy. Third, your arteries heal from sugar-induced damage, lowering the risk of vascular disease and improving cholesterol levels.
Yeah, that's all true. If you're insulin resistant, you tend to have higher cholesterol levels. You tend to have higher triglycerides in severe cases. And you also tend to have more damage to the vasculature, to the cardiovascular system, because high amounts of continuous sugar. We're not talking about just like a one time consumption, talking about long time consumption, high levels of, sustained blood sugar can lead to endothelial dysfunction, which is cells that line our blood vessels. And that can ultimately affect all kinds of different other aspects, like cholesterol can get into the arteries or the subendothelium, that would be called, and start to build up and create plaque. Um, and it's also going the sugar molecules, the glucose molecules also glycate, or they bind. They can go through a process called glycation, where they bind to different molecules in your body and can turn into what are known as AGEs, or advanced glycating end products. And those can bind to different receptors on the cells, like endothelial cells, and can activate those receptors. Those receptors are called RAGE receptors, or actually, technically, the R in there is the receptor, so just called RAGE. They're called the AGE receptor, a receptor of AGE. And that can lead to downstream signaling within the cells that ultimately leads to dysfunction within the cells. And there's a lot more that goes downstream from that, but I'll leave it at that. So that is all accurate.
Lastly, your brain and nerves benefit. Reducing sugar decreases inflammation, improves cognitive function, and alleviates numbness in your toes, enhancing your mood and overall brain health.
Yeah, that's all true. Again, sustained high levels of glucose in your bloodstream can affect your brain. Ultimately, if you're in really serious conditions, your brain cells no longer are sensitive to the glucose that they would otherwise take up, which can lead to diabetic levels of ketone body production. And that's where you get ketone levels that start to rise. And that's really downstream level of diabetes. That's a very dangerous levels of diabetes. It can affect your nerves as well. You can feel that in your feet, like tingling sensation. You could lose your legs because of really serious complications. Again, this is talking about very downstream effects of type 2 diabetes. And then she mentioned earlier retinopathy. Well, I mean, that's also related to the brain-centric aspect of blood sugar.
If it is hard for you to give sugar up, consider having an herb that can detox completely and boost the proliferation of mitochondria in stem cells to remove sugar from your body.
Wow, okay, that evolved. Uh, okay, an herb that or, something that can fully detox your system. Anytime I hear the word detox, I get, it's like something that goes off of me. It's like alarm bells of like, uh-oh, BS radar, BS radar. Unless you're talking about like chelating metals or trying to deal with some sort of actual poison like cyanide or something like that, or arsenic. I The word detox is just like is massively overused. So yeah, anyway, this herb apparently leads to increases in mitochondrial biogenesis and affects our stem cells as well. Wow, okay.
Moringa is the tree that I recommend when people usually ask me to help them lose weight and boost energy.
Okay, moringa is the herbal supplement. I don't know a whole lot about moringa, to be honest with you, so I'd have to look into this a bit more. But from what I have read on it, there actually is evidence that moringa does have some effect on mitochondria. I think that the evidence is pretty weak, to be honest with you. As a previous mitochondrial researcher, we looked at many markers of mitochondria to see mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the production of new mitochondria. And a lot of the studies just use like they'll look at, 5 different markers and one of them is increased. So is that really compelling research? But that said, there are multiple studies, and I have not read all multiple studies, so it is possible that this herb does have an effect. Now, to relate this to how it affects your blood sugar levels, so your sugar in general. Your mitochondria have the capacity to take up glucose and use that glucose for energy generation. So that's the general idea, or at least that's what I think that she's talking about.
Brand I use is Rosabella, and I've linked the product in TikTok shop so you don't have to find it.
Well, that is convenient. Oh, how very kind. Uh, yeah, I think overall this video is okay. It's got some truth to it, but you have to have like a background in bioenergetics, which I did a lot of bioenergetic work in my master's, to be able to tease out what's correct and what's not correct in terms of like the nuances. And there's a lot that I've left out. But ultimately the video's okay. I just again, that word detox. Anyway, I'll see you till next time.